Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 15th of November 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, with 20 minutes or so of gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, the 3DS outselling PlayStation Vita 47-1 in Japan. GTA 5's new trailer and more information about the title. Next-gen consoles and their business models have to change, according to a GamesIndustry.biz writer. Security issues result in Origin accounts being hijacked, and Modern Warfare 4 rumors abound. Sony's having something of a rough time over in Japan at the moment. The 3DS is currently outselling the Vita 47-1, with last week's sales figures for the Vita reaching only 4,021 units. In comparison, the 3DS managed to sell 187,077 units over the course of that week, and were boosted pretty significantly by the release of Animal Crossing New Leaf, which sold 721,000 copies in its opening week. Not too shabby at all. Sony is repeatedly having problems actually getting people to buy this unit, both in Japan and, of course, in other countries, and the 3DS is slapping it silly all across the board. The Vita had no games in the top 30 last week, whereas the 3DS happened to have no less than 14 games in the top 30 charts in Japan. Rough, isn't it? Japan's an interesting market because more often than not, you have a situation where people are very much willing to buy a console for a single game. And the surge in sales figures for the 3DS this week is most likely to do with the fact that there's a new Animal Crossing game. Whenever there's a new Dragon Quest game, this tends to happen. Certain JRPGs, like maybe a new Persona game, for instance, the fact that if you think about Persona 4, it was one of the best-selling titles of all time over there. Persona 4 Golden is on its way to the PlayStation Vita, but it is just a port of a game that a lot of these guys have already played, so I have to wonder how successful that's really going to be for them. Right now, the Vita has one stonking, very obvious, glaring problem, and that's the fact that it doesn't have enough interesting software on it in order to warrant a purchase. I've been keeping a lookout for games to play on my PlayStation Vita, and I'm just honestly not finding them. The launch lineup was strong if you wanted ports. For original software, it really wasn't that good at all. Most of the games I have on my Vita are portable versions of games I already own, because I think, hey, you know what would be great if I happen to have a portable version of this? I've got stuff like Ultimate Marvel, I've got stuff like Mortal Kombat, I've got Rayman, I've got Disgaea 3, you know, the list goes on and on. Most of the good games on that console are ports. We need original IP that's interesting. Either that, or we need franchise-specific titles made for the 3DS, stuff like Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation. That is a new game on its own, and it has been released on the Vita. It's a completely standalone title. Another example, of course, would be the upcoming game Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified. That is, once again, a different game. That stuff's pretty interesting. But aside from that, stuff like Persona 4 Golden, that's great for me because I never got the chance to really play Persona, but for other people that have already played it to death, are they really going to buy another version just for a little bit of bonus content? Possibly not. Now, I'd like to point out that the Vita doesn't have any of the strong traditional Japanese handheld franchises. The PSP did really well over there as a result of really one thing: Monster Hunter. That's absolutely huge. It was massive for the PSP. It was a system seller. That isn't happening right now on the Vita. There is no announcement of a Monster Hunter for the PS Vita. However, there are two titles for the 3DS. It really just seems like right at the moment there isn't enough support, and it's a little bit of a catch-22. People don't want to make games for this system because not enough people own it, not enough people own it because there aren't enough good games for the system, which is why, of course, it's in your best interest to have very strong first or third-party launch titles, and I think maybe it's up to Sony to actually pull this one out of the bag here. It's a shame because it's a nice piece of hardware. Unfortunately, it's also an expensive piece of hardware, and some would argue that the console's usefulness is being outmoded by other mobile devices such as tablets and smartphones. I certainly hope this isn't the case because I prefer a dedicated gaming machine with actual proper controls, but it's hard to argue with the market. Second trailer for Grand Theft Auto 5 has been released and is currently running in the background right now, although I'd highly recommend you go and watch it with the sound, because that's a fairly important part of that particular presentation. Needless to say, since it has licensed music, and I'm talking, I can't really show you that here, but you can have a look at the graphics and what's going on within that world in particular. Along with the large information blowout in the recent issue of Game Informer, a number of things have been revealed, including the fact that there are three main protagonists, Trevor, Franklin, and Michael. The game will be the largest open world so far, they claim, and also features improved combat and instant character switching. What I really like about this trailer is the fact that it actually straight up reminds me of a movie trailer. It really does. It is actually incredibly well put together. Even from a cinematography perspective, it's well shot. The camera angles are really good. The writing is really good. It just seems like it's really well presented. And it's an impressive trailer, to say the least. As I said, it really does remind me of a movie trailer, which is not something that most games manage to pull off. As regards to GTA 5, for me, it's always been a bit of a case of indifference because GTA 4 was really quite rough on PC release. And as a direct result of that, I didn't really have a huge amount of interest. In fact, the last GTA game I properly played would be Vice City. I don't think I ever touched San Andreas at any point, and as I said, GTA 4 ran like crap on the vast majority of systems on PC. I'm certainly hoping that they will improve the PC version, but you've also got to bear in mind that this is going to be coming out on current generation consoles by the looks of it. I have to wonder just how far they can really push this. This is a very big, detailed open-world game. Direct comparisons between GTA 4 and GTA 5 reveal an exceptional increase in the actual graphical fidelity of the world. So how on earth do they make that happen, one has to wonder. One way or the other, it's entirely possible that GTA 5 could just be the last great game on current generation consoles before we switch on over to the newest generation. Rockstar came out today and specifically said, yes, it will be on current generation consoles. Quote, Rockstar is a content company, not a hardware company. We use the technology we have to create content, and we try not to let ourselves get beholden to the hardware. The fact that hardware's so mature right now is exactly why we're able to go on to the next level. GTA 4 was our first attempt at a new platform and HD visuals, so the first part of development was seriously difficult. Now we know what the hardware's capable of, so it's become a lot easier to move things along and a lot more fun too. An interesting attitude there from Rockstar, and I certainly hope that it doesn't limit it too much, but considering the fact that we do not have announcements from Microsoft or Sony as of yet as regards to their next generation hardware, it's not entirely surprising that very few developers are pushing their software to the next generation, because, well, they don't know what the next generation actually is. Let's follow up on the issue of next-gen hardware, shall we? Talk a little bit about this article by Steve Peterson, which you can, of course, read by clicking the description below this video. And this is on the subject of the actual business model of next-gen consoles, and he makes the claim that next-gen consoles require next-gen business models. The first half of the article is essentially, for the most part, a bit of a history lesson. Many of you probably already know what's going on with this, the video game crash, and how all of that actually ended up occurring. But it goes on to talk a little bit about the current console business model. The idea that you sell retail games for around $60, or you can go on Xbox Live Arcade or PlayStation Network for anywhere between $10 and $20, really. And then you have this certification process whereby you get the first patch for free, and then every subsequent patch is costing you about $10,000 to implement. An example that was given in this article was, of course, the Fez issue, whereby the game was released in a buggy state. There was a patch that was corrupting game files, and they ended up not being able to issue a patch simply because they didn't want to pay the price that Microsoft was actually charging. Now, it goes on to compare the mobile market to the console market in that it's very easy to get games onto mobile devices, whether it be Android or iOS. Patching is free, you can change prices at will, and you have an awful lot of control. You're able to release a game very, very easily in comparison to putting a game on Xbox Live Arcade or PlayStation Network. I think the article is certainly lacking because it doesn't actually talk about the Xbox Live Indie section at all. It never seems to mention it, which is really weird, but I can definitely see where it's coming from. The idea is that there are a bunch of different ways of experiencing games now, and consoles haven't adapted to that at all. It's only recently that the first free-to-play game was actually released on Xbox. This is just an absurd idea when you think about it, considering this has been happening on PC now for many years. And yet, Xbox Live has only just got one. Now, in the meantime, there are mobile games which are selling millions upon millions of copies in games like League of Legends, which have 35+ million active accounts, and these are, of course, all free-to-play games. Now, Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network, in their current form, do not really support that business model. They have the very traditional setup whereby you purchase a game upfront, and that's what you get. And it's pretty much as easy as it could possibly be, or at least you think it is. Most people, I suppose, would say, upon first glance, well, isn't it just easier to buy a game straight up for 15 bucks and then not have to worry about it? Now, I would personally agree, because I'm very much an old-school gamer, but here's the thing. There's a new generation of gamers that have experienced games in many, many different ways. If your first experience of video games was on a smartphone, chances are you ran into free-to-play very early, or you ran into very, very low cost to entry, and maybe there were in-app purchases which helped bring up the overall profit margin for the game, or maybe it was just a cheap game. It was a small game with a cheap concept, it was easy, it wasn't particularly in-depth at all, but it was a little bit of fun. And more often than not, those gamers actually aren't all that interested in spending 60 bucks in order to get this so-called in-depth gaming experience. They don't care about that. And it's not really unreasonable for them not to care about that. They have been able to pick up games for anywhere between 69 to 99 cents, or even play a game for free on their mobile device, and they're suddenly now being asked to pay 60 times as much. And they'll say, well, is this game really 60 times as fun? And generally speaking, the answer's probably going to be no. You can be as discerning a gamer as you want, but it's actually really hard to argue that some of these games are good value in comparison to what you can get on iOS. This and the growing free-to-play market are very much the elephants in the room when it comes down to future console development business model. It is something that these guys are going to have to wrestle with, it is something that these guys are going to have to consider, and the gaming market is going to have to change. Personally, I actually prefer to buy my game up front and not have to worry about microtransactions and things like that. I would like all of my content there, but there is more than enough room for that. On iOS and on Android, there are plenty of games that you just buy up front, there's no in-app purchase, and you just get the whole game. There's nothing stopping you scaling that model. I don't view that model as out of date. When I buy a movie on Blu-ray, I expect the entire movie to be there. I don't expect to have to pay every 20 bloody minutes. I mean, the very notion of selling chapters for a movie is absurd. Selling individual episodes for a television show, sure, but most people, I would imagine, do pick up the full series box set if they want to buy it that way, or of course they experience it on Netflix. Gaming on console just seems to be very, very limited in the ways that people have to actually experience and the barriers to entry. I think that's perhaps the most important thing of all, isn't it? How many barriers to entry are there, and how tall is that barrier to entry? If it's a $60 barrier to entry, you are keeping an awful lot of people out, whether it be because they simply don't want to pay 60 bucks, or whether they just can't pay 60 bucks. I was in GameStop yesterday, and we were just shopping around for some 3DS games, and someone comes in and they ask, is there a used copy of Call of Duty Black Ops 2? And they say, well, no, because the game only just came out today. And it was understandable why that person asked for a used copy, because 60 bucks is pretty expensive, and even saving $5 can be a big deal when it comes down to budgeting for the family. Not everyone is wealthy, not everyone can afford every game on the planet, and as a result, what you're getting is this growing swell of support for cheaper game experiences, or stuff that can be experienced without having to pay initially. Maybe you have to pay further down the line, but for some people that's not really a big deal. I knew a lot of people that used to survive on shareware and demos and freeware games and things like that. I did a lot of that when I was at university. I would always be shopping around for the cheapest stuff I could find because I didn't have the money for it. Now there are entire business models constructed around this, and yes, consoles do have to adapt, especially if they want to make any money, because there's been this massive market for the longest time of second-hand games, which are there to cater to that particular demographic of people that do not want to pay that much for video games. And companies have been losing out. They have the opportunity, I feel, with the next gen to actually start to provide various ways of experiencing video games and capturing all manner of demographics. I think it's safe to say that, honestly, with the latest console generation, they have singularly failed to do that, and they have not been able to adapt thus far to this changing marketplace. For more information on this topic, please check out the full article in the description below this video. There have been various reports on the subject of Origin accounts being hijacked and EA's security checks actually getting in the way of the reacquisition of said account. The situation is still very much developing at the moment. EA has responded with a statement and says, at this point we have no reason to believe there has been any intrusion into our Origin database. The statement appears to be fairly boilerplate, honestly. It says, well, if there's a problem, contact our customer service, and so on and so forth. Our security measures are very, very strong, blah, 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 blah. You can read the whole statement in the description below this video if you so desire. But reports are that various things are being changed, including the personal questions on the account, so that when you ring up and they ask you your personal question and answers and things like that, they claim that the answer is incorrect. One user claimed to have called EA customer service, being asked his date of birth, and then told that his date of birth was actually wrong. So it would appear that if this is really widespread, then these guys actually have access not only to your account, but also to your security questions and the ability to change this stuff around, which is fairly disastrous, since it means that recovering the account is very, very difficult indeed. Now, we don't actually know at this point how widespread this thing really is. There are reports of it, but as always on the internet, you never know how big an issue actually is. It could just be a few users that happen to have gotten unlucky, or it could be widespread and we don't necessarily know yet. I'll try and keep you updated over the next couple of days as to what's going on, but I would, as always, give my standard advice: change your passwords, scan for keyloggers, the two biggest things, and for God's sake, watch where you're putting your user information in. Some websites are not necessarily as legitimate as they look. EA is unfortunately rather legendary for its rather poor customer service, including the fact that many of its customer service agents are quite obviously outsourced due to their poor English skills and very slow reply times. This is no doubt not helping the situation whatsoever, and one user reported it took him upwards of 6 days to recover his account. Various reports also indicate that the email addresses on these accounts are being changed to .ru and potentially Belarusian email addresses, so we don't as of yet know whether or not this is some kind of organized attack or whether it's just a bunch of random unlucky folks. But one way or the other, please, folks, do keep an eye on where your information goes, and if there are any updates on the situation, I will let you know in future episodes. And finally, in news that will surprise absolutely nobody, Call of Duty 2013 is rumored to be Modern Warfare 4. Yes, I know, truly, it really is an amazing piece of news, isn't it? Now, as regards to why we supposedly know that, a site called Silicon Era cites anonymous sources on the subject of the game's voice acting. It even provides a few lines. Now, this site has been right before. They claim to have anonymous sources with information about sleeping dogs. That information turned out to be correct. They also have information on Tomb Raider, which may or may not end up being accurate. The source claims that the main character of this game is a battle-hardened veteran in his mid-30s with a nihilistic point of view, currently codenamed Ben Burke. What a very unfortunate name indeed. There is also said to be a flashback scene in Somalia featuring John Soap McTavish, who is, of course, a frequent character in these particular games. Now, it's hard to get excited about this. I mean, really, honestly, it's actually anti-excitement. Modern Warfare has been a very boring series for the longest time. The Treyarch stuff at least tends to go a little bit outside of the bounds of what is comfortable for this particular series, but yet more Modern Warfare installments are hardly what I would be looking for. A battle-hardened veteran in his mid-30s with a nihilistic point of view, yes. Well, that could apply to an awful lot of different things. That's pretty much the generic burly armored space marine of the modern military shooter genre. No doubt we will be seeing a Call of Duty appearing in 2013. It would be very surprising if we didn't, considering we've been getting one for the last umpteen million years. And it's also been reported that Black Ops 2 has already sold a fairly ridiculous amount of copies, estimated somewhere between the 6.5 to 7.2 million range on day one. Alright folks, that wraps up Content Patch for the day. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.